So remember that what we're doing in chapter 7 and 8 is the goal is to find Q that maximizes profit. And so if we're trying to find the quantity, then it might be useful to build a model in which we're looking at costs per quantity and not total costs of production over a bunch of quantities. So now we're going to begin looking at per unit costs. Right? And so we've learned that total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost. That was what we did in our cost table on the worksheet. To very simply turn this into per unit cost, we might just divide by the quantity that we're producing. So, for example, total cost over Q is average total cost. So, if we look at our graph here, we see that if we produce 2 units, it costs us $80 to do it. Now, this is a new table. This has nothing to do with the data we created in the tennis ball game. This is just for an example, so we can learn a little bit here. So, $80 to produce 2 units. How much does it cost on average to produce a unit? Well, 80 units for 2 is the same thing as $40 per unit on average. Right? Do you see how I did that? Total cost is 80 divided by 2. TC over Q gives me the average of $40 per unit to produce. Cool? Well, if we divide total cost by Q, we can also divide these other 2 things by Q. Fixed cost over Q is, of course, average fixed cost. And variable cost over Q is average variable cost. And so these are just the components of total cost broken down to their per unit measurement. So, so if we go over here, for example, let's finish this row. If my variable cost is 30 and my total cost is 80, how do I know what fixed cost is? Well, there's 2 ways to look at this. Use this equation first, right? Total cost is 80. I know variable cost is 30. So what does fixed cost have to be? Fixed cost has to be 50, right? The other way to think about this is I know that when the firm is producing nothing, they have a total cost of 50. Well, what's variable cost when the firm isn't producing anything? Variable costs correspond to output. More output means more workers needed, more variable cost. So there's no variable costs when we have 0 output, only fixed costs. If I know what fixed cost of 50, it's going to be the same for every quantity produced because it doesn't change. So that would be another way that you know fixed cost is 50. So with that information, can you figure out what average fixed cost is? Yeah. I take 50 divided by 2. Average fixed cost is going to be 25. 2 ways to solve for average variable cost. We could take 30 and divide by 2. That'd be 15. But the other thing to note is that since total cost over total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost, if we just divide by Q, we divide the whole thing by Q, and we know that average total cost equals average fixed cost plus average variable cost. So 30 over 2 is 15, just like 40 equals average fixed cost plus of 25 plus what does average variable cost be, and what must that be? 15, right? Cool. The only other per unit cost measure we have is, again, marginal cost, which is change in total cost over change in quantity. So it tells us how much total cost changes when we produce 1 more unit. Here, we went from producing nothing and having a total cost of 50 to producing 1 and having an average and adding 10. So, change in quantity was 1. Change in total cost is 10. What must this be? 60. Right? How did I get that? Change in total cost over change in quantity equals 10. I use the marginal cost. Okay. Fill in the rest of this table. And in fact, on your quiz, we're going to have a few boxes to solve for, and so this is going to be box A. All right, and then this is going to be box B. And then this is going to be box C for your quiz. All right, be back in a minute.